Good morning and welcome to the Somerset County Symposium on Arts, Heritage, and History as Social Economic Drivers. My name is Colleen Marr. I have the distinction of being the Somerset County Administrator, and I am here this morning to welcome you and to thank you for being a part of today's what will be an exciting discussion. The Cultural and Arts Commission is an office within county government that is responsible for the developing and the promoting and the supporting of the arts, the art history, and cultural heritage right here in beautiful Somerset County. Communities that cultivate arts, cultural heritage, and history reap broad benefits such as civic empowerment, economic development, and improved health and overall well-being, which is why we're actually here this morning. Somerset County Cultural and Heritage Commission is currently undertaking an update to our long-range plan, and this discussion about cultural innovation is part of that effort. So you this morning are helping us kick off part of our public engagement process. The best cultural initiatives, as we know, are collaborative, interdisciplinary, and community-driven, using creative placemaking principles to integrate arts, heritage, and history with the natural environment to encourage broad and diverse participation. Our plan looks to connect, enhance, and accompany many of the county's other initiatives. So that's why this morning, this panel is going to have a great discussion because they each are experts from the arts, heritage, tourism, and film sectors that will provide insight into cultivating a comprehensive strategy to advance cultural and heritage initiatives. So I would like to introduce our panelists. This morning, I am pleased to welcome Stephen Gorelick, who is the Executive Director of the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission. We would like to welcome Tanisha Nash Lair, who is President and CEO of the Newark Symphony Hall. Also, big welcome to Kelly Rafael of the Passaic County, who is the Assistant County Administrator and oversees the Department of Cultural and Heritage Affairs. And finally, wrapping up our panel is Ben Stone, Director of Arts and Culture for Smart Growth America. This morning's great panelists will be moderated by Somerset County's Commissioner Melanie Morano, who serves as the liaison to our Cultural and Heritage Affairs. Full bios will be available to you up on the website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over and put in capable hands Commissioner Morano.
Thank you so much, Colleen. We appreciate your intro here. We at Somerset are so very excited about this panel. As Colleen mentioned, this is our kickoff to our long-range planning. At Somerset, we truly believe that arts and culture are threaded into everything we do here. Our economic growth, our civic engagement, our health and well-being. I mean, to the point that we have just now launched a film commission here in Somerset. So we are extremely excited about this conversation today. We are grateful for our panelists that have joined us and given their time to share with everybody on this call, especially our team here in Somerset County. So one thing I do ask anybody that is a participant today, you know, this is a conversation. This isn't just a talk at, this is a talk with. So please use the chat. Share with us your thoughts, share with us your questions. We will be answering those questions later on, but we do want to hear from you and hopefully stimulate this arts and culture thread and integration for not just Somerset, but for all the counties and municipalities that are participating now with us. So with that being said, I'd like each of the panelists to just give a brief introduction on their own for us, and I'd like to start with Ben Stone.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm joining you from the West Coast, where I'm going to try my best not to be distracted by the beautiful sunrise happening outside my window. So as you just heard, I'm Ben Stone, Director of Arts and Culture with Smart Growth America. I work quite a bit with our program Transportation for America as well. I'll be very brief with my intro. My background is in the visual arts and urban planning, and I really have worked at that intersection for the past decade and a half or so, largely in my hometown, which you can see virtually behind me in Baltimore. So I'm an East Coaster as well. Actually have a lot of family in Jersey too. And I really came to this work for a number of reasons. One, working as visual artist, making large scale works of public art. I did not work on the piece behind me. That's Jonathan Borowski's piece in Baltimore. But coming to this work from the public art world, I really found that my interest in the arts was really about working with communities, going out to meetings with the public and actually taking in public input to determine what projects should look like. And when I was in, I think it was just when I was in grad school or just after grad school, the Knight Foundation, a foundation that works around the country, had just released a report called Soul of the Community, which probably many of you are familiar with. And if you're not, I encourage you to look it up when you're done with this webinar. And that research really looked at proving a hypothesis that folks at the Knight Foundation had, which is that communities where people are really attached to their neighborhood, they feel good about living in the place where they live, are economically more viable than other places. And this report, which was something like 15,000 people interviewed, in 26 different cities where the Knight Foundation works, proved that that was in fact true. The communities where people did feel and reported they felt more attached to their communities were more economically viable and saw more economic growth over the 3-year period of this report. And why am I mentioning this to you? Community attachment is really crucial, and this study actually found what attaches people to communities. And in my work in the past, I worked for the Economic Development Agency in Baltimore. And if you asked any of my coworkers, or probably even myself back then, more than a decade ago, what it is that attaches people to their community, what makes people stay in the place where they live, I'd probably tell you things like safety and access to jobs and education. You know, if you think about yourself or other folks, and even I just moved actually this past weekend. You think about what makes people move, it's often for a new job opportunity or for a safer neighborhood or for access to parks and things of that nature. The reality is that through 14,000 people being surveyed, the 3 things that make people most attached to their community are the aesthetics of the community, the appearance of what things actually look like in the neighborhood, buildings, architecture, design, public art, the openness of people around them, and social offerings, things they can actually do in their spare time. And again, why am I mentioning this to you? Those are 3 things that are definitely the realm of the arts community. Artists are definitely known for their openness, inviting people in. Artists wouldn't survive, especially performing artists, if they weren't able to invite people in. Aesthetics is pretty obvious. And social offerings, of course, performance, visual arts is definitely the realm of the arts world. So looking forward to chatting with you more about all of that and how this intersects with the transportation and economic development worlds in a few moments. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Tanisha, Nash, Laird.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to be brief because I know we have a long panel. Again, I'm president and CEO of Newark Performing Arts Corporation, which manages the historic Newark Symphony Hall, which the city of Newark has actually owned since the 1970s. When Newark Performing Arts Corporation was formed, our corporate bylaws stated that the purpose of the corporation is to, quote, cultivate, promote, foster, sponsor, and develop performing arts productions for the general public. But in recent years, we've augmented our mission with a vision of bringing Newark Symphony Hall to life to fulfill our potential as a cultural asset and economic cornerstone that stimulates economic development and improved quality of life in Newark, which is New Jersey's largest city. And so we believe a capital of culture. And so we're doing that in several ways, right? So number one, we are renovating our vintage 1925 Performing Arts Center. And this renovation alone has a $50 million price tag and will create 500 construction jobs. That's economic activity. Number two, during the pandemic, actually, we created the lab at Newark Symphony Hall, which is our new performing arts business incubator and career accelerator for performing artists of all disciplines. We sort of did a scan of what really were the opportunities first in Newark, because there is, of course, another performing arts center in NJPAC, but also in the state. And we found that there was an opportunity to really support performing artists, especially since we're in the shadow of what is obviously an entertainment capital in New York City, but they can actually develop their careers right here in their home state. And number three, which I guess we're going to talk about a little bit because of another panelist, the actual utilization of our facility for both performing arts and film and television. You know, I joined Newark Symphony Hall almost 3 years ago, and that was one of the ways that we actually turned around our finances, and that was by partnering with advertising and television, and most recently with Wu-Tang and American Saga, which streams on Hulu. And, you know, when we are a union house, and we have to call in IATSE stagehands, and our IATSE stagehand said that it was the first work that they had had since the pandemic. And I can't tell you how that made me feel to be able to know that I'm helping someone, you know, feed their family. And so thank you for having me, and I look forward to this discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, Tanisha. And Stephen Gorelick.
Hi, pleasure to be with you today. I am the Executive Director of the New Jersey Motion Picture and Television Commission. Been in touch with Tanisha a lot lately because of the nature of what we do, and we'll talk about that. We're a state agency within the Business Action Center, which is also within the larger Department of State. And there's a perfect example. The Department of State and the Secretary of State, Tanisha Way, handle both the arts, well, elections, of course, the arts, and also economic development. So they put that all under the same umbrella. So that sort of is a microcosm, I guess, of what we're discussing here today. We were created back in 1977. We're an agency of economic development for certain. We do contribute to the cultural community, I would like to think, but we're an agency of economic development. We promote the film industry in New Jersey by assisting production companies in scouting and securing locations and services while they're in the state. And we liaise between production companies and government agencies at all levels, federal, state, county, municipal. And also we liaise with the business community and the private sector as well in attempting to promote filmmaking here and attract production companies to the state. We also assist production companies in applying for whatever financial incentives are available at any particular time. And there's some very good ones available right now, which is sort of pushing the rebirth of film and television here in the state in a very, very big way. We also promote the growth of infrastructure in New Jersey, the building of studios and attracting equipment houses and stuff like that. The bricks and mortar of an industry that will create permanence for that industry here in New Jersey, which is what we're looking to do. We're looking long range, not short term. The commission has a board of 10 commissioners. They're very well respected. Our chairman is Michael Uslan, who's the executive producer of all the Batman movies and many other movies and such. Our vice chairman is David Smith of the Princeton Public Affairs Group. We have a small but dedicated staff of 7 people. And what we do as a staff is to make certain that production companies working in New Jersey have a pleasant and productive and profitable experience free of unnecessary red tape. We try and intervene if there are issues and such. And we help filmmakers cut through that. Why do we do this? Because production companies spend millions and millions and millions of dollars here in New Jersey while they're working on location. And they hire thousands of people every year. We're talking about full-time, part-time, and temporary jobs. It's a combination. So we're all about economic development and job creation, and also image enhancement, as Ben alluded to. That's an important aspect. It's not a tangible aspect so much. We can't put it into dollars and cents, but the importance of projecting images of New Jersey as a desirable place to live, to work, and to vacation is essential, I think, to the betterment of the state and the various communities. The first full year of our tax credit program under the current administration, I must say, and we thank the administration and the legislature for making it happen. The first full year was 2019, and our revenue rose from prior to that we had about $67 million a year, and overnight it rose to $420 million a year in revenue, and we're looking to exceed $500 million this year. It's been an incredibly busy year. We did have a little temporary glitch when the pandemic took hold, and all production basically closed down for most of the year, most of 2020, but we're making a tremendous comeback. So things are looking very, very rosy in terms of the production industry here in New Jersey.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephen. And Kelly Raffel.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for having me this morning. And we kind of heard this a little bit before. Well, first off, my name is Kelly. I'm the Assistant County Administrator for Passaic County, and I'm the Director for the Department of Cultural Historic Affairs. And just like the Somerset Cultural and Heritage Commission, we too are responsible for developing and implementing sort of this extensive, public programs calendar and heritage tourism campaign to try and encourage, more public awareness and visitation to like our county's various cultural assets. And I love being a part of panels like this with other counties because really we get to see, and this is probably the few times we get to see and really talk about what each of us are doing. And for sort of our background, so my department is this department is only 5 years old. We're the newest department in our county's structure. And we didn't really have a heritage commission that was really aligned with the county government versus it's with our community college here. And our department in every county, right, is different. We happen to manage 12 historic sites. We operate 1 art center and gallery. 4 of our historic sites are actually historic house museums. We have 1 observatory tower, a collection of parks that are listed on the state and national register, and we manage a collection of over 5,000 artifacts of varying degrees. We oversee some grant programs, and we're starting to build a tourism center. We're trying to get into more involvement with our Passaic County Film Commission and film permitting. So our hands are in all these the different facets. And we're still learning, and we're working on creating sort of a sustainable arts and cultural program countywide. And as we're growing, we're understanding more and more, right, that the arts and cultures are really linked to economic, development and economic factors. And it does, right, our main goal, we want to bring visitors here. So what does that do for, businesses in our county, employers in our county, attracting further investments? You've been following the development of the Great Falls, right? Businesses are popping up. Housing is now coming into the district. And I really think the role of government is sort of, or how I see it, is that one, we are here to assist in, right, engaging the community on all of these benefits and, making the partners to kind of create this program countywide. And then the second is building that infrastructure so creative placemaking can happen. And I'll turn it over.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks to all of our panelists. So getting into our questions now. We know the arts, culture, and history have tremendous societal and economic benefits if integrated in a deliberative manner. A key to achieving this collaboration across sectors, including transportation, natural resource protection, economic development, and the like. Knowing this, what are your thoughts about forming effective partnerships and implementing cross-sector initiatives to benefit overall well-being? I'd like to start with Ben and Tanisha on this.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that question. I've made it no secret that I really think that this work is important, especially in a community like Newark, for economic development. And for me, economic development also includes workforce development. So I think as we're thinking about bringing the next big thing to the city, and in particular to Symphony Hall, I'm always thinking about how can we maximize the impact of that work. So I mentioned earlier that the renovation of Newark Symphony Hall is going to create 500 construction jobs. But when I again looked at what that looked like and the, I guess what you could say, the demographics of the people that are typically doing that sort of historic preservation work. And if I didn't say it earlier, I'm also a former trustee of Preservation New Jersey. And when I went on that board, I made it very clear that most of what I would be advocating for is for communities of color, which I view as historically excluded. And so the work that I'm focused on and that the board and I are focused on is really about maximizing the opportunities for local residents. And so in this particular case, from a historic preservation standpoint, identifying opportunities to train local people in historic preservation, which is really a form of artistry itself. So that's one of the ways. When we're looking at what goes on the stage at Symphony Hall and all of the people that are required to actually put on a production, again, the local community was, in my view, historically excluded from those opportunities. So how do we partner with organizations like IATSE, like the historic and building trades, traditional building trades, to put together training programs to get to those folks? And when I'm negotiating with them, I talk about the fact that I'm making sure that they have opportunities, that by activating Newark Symphony Hall more than it had been in the past, literally generating way more revenue, way more opportunities, more wages for IATSE than had ever been before. And so why don't you work with us so that we can train 10, 15 local people, because for them, that's going to substantially change their lives. Imagine being able to go in and make, starting even during training, $29 an hour, and then working $45, $49 an hour. When we had Viacom in Newark Symphony Hall for one of the productions that they did, they actually shot the opening segment of Missy Elliott's tribute for the VMAs at Symphony Hall. And we went into overtime. That meant we were going into time and a half and double time. They were making upwards of $98 an hour. Imagine what that looks like to be able to provide that for opportunities for local people, because they're going to spend locally as well. So as you're looking at economic development and growth, it really is a system. If we can get more money into folks by our activities and to their pockets, they're going to contribute to the local community as well. And so I have a whole lot of thoughts about this. I was also a former official for economic development, which I probably didn't mention, a municipal official in Trenton, New Jersey, and then an appointed state official on the Urban Enterprise Zone Authority Board by Governor Corzine. And I was always passionate about this idea that workforce development should be an inclusive part of economic development. And so that's where I'm coming from. And I want to give Ben an opportunity to talk. Thank you so much for the question, though.
Thanks for those comments. I'm going to pick up on the how to do effective partnerships part of the question, talk about that for just a minute. So a lot of my work with Smart Growth America is really focused on working nationally with transportation agencies, sometimes state DOTs, often transit agencies, municipal DOTs, but generally civil engineers, planners, the kinds of folks who build projects based on precedent. They look at what was done before, they do something really similar with a very slight tweak. And my role as an arts administrator and director of arts and culture with my organization is to often go to them and suggest, why don't you try something totally out of the box, totally new, and incorporate some artists into your project? And I get a lot of head scratching and occasionally eye rolling and often just confusion, as you're probably all not surprised to hear. The transportation sector is definitely a sector that likes to do things the way they've been done in the past. As I always tell people, if you're an engineer, you don't design a bridge from scratch. You look at how it was designed before and don't change too much, unless the bridge, of course, collapsed in the past. And there's good reason for that. But of course, many of us know that all across the country, as we're increasingly having conversations about this, communities of color have been bulldozed to build highways, and transportation sector has made many, many mistakes. So if you do everything based on precedent, you just get the same mistakes repeated over and over again. So my work is really about pointing out that fact and about trying to find what I call the pain points of the transportation sector. And I think this applies to really any sector that the arts world is looking to collaborate with. And really the first question to ask is, what is it that the other sector you're looking to partner with is going to benefit by working with artists? And what is it they actually care about? And there's a number of field scans that were created, I think 10 in total, by Art Place America, looking at the ways in which arts intersect with other sectors. So I, of course, wrote the one on arts and transportation. There's one on arts and public health, the environment, workforce development, public safety, et cetera, housing is a great one. And for me, we found that there were really 7 ways, and I won't list them all, they're all on our website. You can go to transportation.art to find them, but really 7 ways that artists are helping the transportation sector, and 7 pain points or things that are keeping transportation professionals awake at night. And really the main ones and the things I often lead with are that the transportation sector is federally mandated to do community outreach and build community support. And a lot of that is really faked and massaged, and people maneuver around doing that in the way they're supposed to. But at the end of the day, the public in many places is organized enough that they can tank projects if they don't like it. So the transportation sectors realize they actually have to have more meaningful community engagement, and the cultural sector and the arts sector is definitely better at being tapped into what people know and think and feel about the place they live than most civil engineers. No offense to any civil engineers listening in today. So we've often partnered those agencies with artists to do that kind of work. But I'll just add also, as I close this section, that the transportation sector talks about things in a very different way than the arts sector. It talks about things in terms of timelines in a very different way, has very different ideas as to what makes a project successful or not successful. And a lot of my work is about going to different communities and separating the transportation folks and the arts folks into two different rooms and trying to educate one another on what it is that makes the other side tick. I often find artists and arts administrators talking about the aesthetic value of their work and why it's so beneficial to use this material or hire this artist to do this one piece. And the transportation folks are thinking, is this going to make my budget run over? Is this going to make the project delivered late? And what is this actually going to do about road safety? And can you show me the evidence to prove that it'll actually do what you're claiming it'll do? And if the arts sector can't answer those questions pretty directly, it's not going to progress to the next stage of conversation. So really understanding where people are coming from, what it is that makes each side interested in the work they're doing, what they're mandated to actually do, and then what they're really concerned about improving that your work can help them overcome those barriers is the place to start.
And if I may, when you say the transportation sector, are you meaning roadways, rail stations, bus depots, all of the above? Can you elaborate a little bit on the specifics?
Yeah, good question. A question I often get. I'd say my organization and my work really works with everyone and everyone. Everything you just mentioned, including bicycles, e-bikes, scooters, active transportation, railways, subways, buses, really all surface transportation. We don't really get into aviation or nautical transportation, but anything else that is on land, we're definitely involved in.
Kelly, Steve, anything to chime in on this? Especially Kelly, I see you're eager.
I'm just eager in the sense that, interestingly enough, in Passaic County, prior to our department, they completed a heritage tourism master plan, which was done through the NJ TPA, and it's actually, the focus is solely on transportation and how to use our byways to get people right from place to place or to interact with cultural sites. So the plan really, it's focused on transportation, which I guess is unique because I don't know, right, in my experience and many other heritage tourism plans that would focus on that. And really for us using our, byways or creating a byway program, especially because like Passaic County, which I think Somerset might be a little similar, like it's, it's a lot of, rural, there's some urban centers, sort of, suburban centers. So we have this very diverse geographic, makeup that, getting people from place to place, and the importance of that and what other factors can we like intertwine with that will help us build our arts and cultural program. So.
Thanks.
I just wanted,
Steve, I'm sorry, Tanisha.
Oh no, I let Steve talk. I wanted to jump in on the transportation, just make a real a point that our vision for the exterior of Newark Symphony Hall does also incorporate street design, streetscape, and thinking about the relationship of the location of public transportation and the bus. So, a lot of times people don't realize all of those things influence and can be, although Kelly does, right, because of their master plan, really affects your production from an art standpoint of the experience of the activities, and especially in terms of heritage tourism. So as you all are thinking about your planning, make sure that you think through how the built transportation infrastructure and even streetscape design affects what you're doing from a cultural planning. That's all.
Yeah, and to add on to that, even during the plan, right? So we were fortunate to have this plan, but it also identified, historic systems. So like we're going to create now a rail trail that, it's an abandoned, trail that now will be brought back into public use, and we'll across, 4 different, towns, and it interconnects with sort of downtown areas, which, right, hopefully the people who are attending the trail are going to, come now to these businesses. So we have, through this first step, now we're developing, this trail. We're developing now Morris Canal Trail that will be now a linear arts district. So using, right, canal paths throughout the county. So I think that, again, like kind of where I opened, like having the government invest, or having, like, we are investing in developing this infrastructure so that we can bring artists, we can bring those different types of programs and those people to work together to create this place.
Again, the synergy, which I love. Stephen, your thoughts on these topics? We've got a lot: transportation, job growth, economic development.
Everything we do is about collaboration, because the difficult things that we're asked to accomplish, or production companies would like to accomplish, require unbelievable amounts of cooperation and looking outside the box. When we bring a elaborate, difficult project perhaps to a town, we have to first sit down with the mayor, the administrator, the police department, and say, okay, take a breath. We're going to tell you what we need to do, and then we'll tell you how it can be done. I mean, we have aliens, invading and War of the Worlds and landing in the middle of Newark, and we have shootouts and car chases, every episode of The Equalizer, T-boning and this and that. A car chase is done, in parts. So on screen, it looks very impressive to watch it. It's actually a little bit dull because it's shot over the course of 2 days. But anyway, we have buildings exploding, and there's a great example, actually also in Newark, that Geostorm, the movie Geostorm. I don't know if anyone's seen it. Didn't get the best of reviews, but anyway, it had the greatest promo I've ever seen. They wanted to shoot a sort of a gag sequence, a candid camera sequence, where this bus filled with people, actual people, it was a candid camera type thing. It's a beautiful sunny day in Newark, and they're driving along, touring the city, and then suddenly they make a turn onto a street, and a storm hits and everything freezes, and these poor people in this bus are watching as people come out, and they're suddenly frozen. They got icicles dropping, and snow everywhere. They can't imagine how this happens. It's a great thing. But to do that, you need the cooperation of, the police department, the engineering department, the fire department, the environmental protection, perhaps, looking at what they're using to create snow, and the local merchants and residents, of course. We do big things like that. And even if we're doing period dramas, like we had also in Newark, the Plot Against America, based on the Philip Roth novel. We had to find period environments that, where to represent the areas where Philip Roth actually grew up, because it was set in that environment in 1940s Newark and the surrounding area, not just Newark. They were in Passaic too. I mean, in Patterson, we've done unbelievable things that have required so much cooperation and collaboration for the upcoming West Side Story, not War of the Worlds, West Side Story. They had to recreate the area around Lincoln Center in New York as it was before it was built and being torn down, and you see the remainders of buildings and period construction equipment and such. So we had to work with the city and all their departments in order to create that. They also created the Warsaw Ghetto there for the TV series Hunters. We had to explain why hundreds of pounds of dirt had to be, thousands of pounds of dirt had to be put on the ground and such. So you do that with the cooperation of all those departments, but we also work with county and heritage commissions. Absolutely, we do, to get, because we do have requirements that we're trying to find buildings that fit a certain period or a certain architecture. And we work with county parks, county police, just mentioning the county, and county roads. We're doing that right now. I shouldn't even, it's early to mention, but we have a movie with Russell Crowe, where he's going to actually be doing a scene in the fall in Braddock Park in Jersey City. And he portrayed Braddock in the movies Cinderella Man. So I'm dying to get a picture of this, him standing next to this statue and such. But we need, cooperation. Just mentioning Somerset County, we Lacey's Story, the Stephen King drama, was shot at a historic house, right? In fact, I live in South Brunswick, right on the border of Franklin Township where it was, and I could walk to that location. So I was very excited about that. It's nice to have filming near me, not just everywhere else. But we've collaborated with arts agencies like the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Because of the pandemic, all these theaters were shut down. So we decided, I was at a meeting with Allison Tratner, and we said, here's an idea. Why don't we put together an online pamphlet of all the theaters in the state, because they're available, they're not being used, and film companies go right in there. You know, so we did that. We sent it all over around the industry, well, I might as well mention now we're working with Tanisha Laird because we have a big TV series for USA Network called America's Big Deal. It's going to be filming from September to December, and suddenly they loved the theater. It had all the ancillary spaces and the big stage, and we're putting people to work there, right? Fantastic. So we're very excited about that. So yeah, collaboration is all we do all the time, and you know, we can't do what we do without it.
I understand that entirely. We appreciate that. So question for you, especially here in Somerset County, we are blessed to be so close to New Brunswick, Morristown, Princeton, Newark. Hop on 78, I could be in Newark in no time. It's a blessing because there are such arts and culture in all these places I'm mentioning, but it also makes it challenging for us in Somerset to create something special here. So my question for you, I mean, we are special here, and we want to make it even more so, but how do we create that special niche here in Somerset? How do we craft that personality for us as we compete for those arts time and dollars and projects and funding? How do we make ourselves special here? And I'm sure this applies to not just Somerset, but to other communities that are listening on the call. So Kelly, Steve, I'd like to hear you take the lead on this, what you think. Kelly, what's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. So I guess where we started, you know, right, I think in one way is we might have found our niche, maybe we haven't, like, you know, it's all about perspective. But, you know, for us to grow our program or to start our program, it's like, well, what do we have? Like, what are our assets that make us maybe different from Bergen County, Essex County? So for us, you know, we started developing art, which is common throughout the state of New Jersey. In the late 1920s, we started our park system, right? We wanted to create a park system that would stretch from the southern part of the county to the northern part of the county. And then with that, right, acquisition of historic sites, et cetera. So that was, I guess, the theme in the 30s when, you know, all of this is taking place. And now, you know, we're here 2010 and there's sort of this reinvestment in the county park system, its historic sites. So the county is on this journey to, you know, renovate, rehabilitate, restore this park system. So, you know, that has been for us, like what our, you know, largest assets, you know, are, and they're contained in. Like we don't have a performing arts center like, you know, Bergen and Morristown, Essex. So we have to kind of, well, if we're not, arts is not it, it's not performing arts, then what is it, right? So with historic sites, and my background is in public history and historic preservation, it's, you know, kind of been focused on historic programming. Washington was here. What are our themes? What story are we trying to tell? We were able to create an interpretive plan, which we just finished this year, which is supposed to link all of our sites, and not just county owned, like who are our partners here? Which I know kind of goes back to the last question, but it really is related to creating what our niche is. Our partners, the Great Falls National Historic Park, the State Park Service. So, you know, both of them, they have parks and they have historic assets. So, right, so that's us, right? We're defined by this. So anyway, I said I'm kind of going back and forth, but in our interpretive plan, these themes, right? So you have the story we're trying to tell, and what are those themes within that story? So immigration, you know, Patterson has 40 different a collection of 40 different languages spoken, 40 different ethnicities. You have multiple religious backgrounds. Passaic, Patterson, Clifton together is very diverse. It's a unique setting. How do we drive into, those communities? It's a lot of first generation immigrants who are here. So, there's that story of immigration, and that, goes back to 1910s, 1920s, telling that. The natural setting and, sort of the geography and, building of that, like how was the land used? A lot of it's preserved land, especially in the upper part of, the county. So telling that, that richness there. Then it's, Washington was here, right? Washington was everywhere, but, with the 250th approaching, that's a theme that also connects a lot of our municipalities, because he really did come from the lower end of the county to the northern end of the county. And I can keep going on more about themes. It might be another panel for a later date, but, creating these plans, which I know, right? Like we love to create plans, but then it's like now the implementation of those plans, which I think has helped us really define where we're supposed to, where we're heading. Being involved in other, maybe state organizations like, Council of the Arts, for us, it's been really helpful to help us define this niche is the tourism industry, the NJTIA, who's helped us kind of understand really what tourism is and the benefits of that, and how we can look at our sites, which, right, is really kind of history focused, centered. How can we apply like marketing? I don't have a marketing background. We, like even the county, right? When we think of marketing in the county, it's not something that, would like, we're not like that kind of business, right? Like we're not a corporate business where we need to invest in that, but no, now we are marketing the county. How do we market the county? Using our niche to market the county to draw those visitors. And yeah, I'm sorry, I can probably go on and on. So I don't know if Steve, you want to jump in, and then I could.
Yeah, I mean, yes, so it flows directly into what I was going to say. In anticipation of this panel, I was thinking about, okay, what unique things does Somerset County have? Because we're looking, we have, again, I have to think like production companies think, because we're trying to attract them. And you have, certainly we look for very ordinary locations like the split level house or the pre-war school or the general store or something like that. But and certainly Somerset County has that in space. There's no question about that. But what are some of the unique things that we would go to Somerset County for? I was thinking about that, and I said, well, we go there for mansions in the States. We have in Bedminster, Goodnight Mommy, the horror film with Naomi Watts was just filmed in Bedminster entirely in 2 different houses. And what did it offer? They needed a lot of land around the house. They wanted a sense of isolation and such. You can get that in Somerset County. You don't get that necessarily in Hudson County. So you have that. We got beautiful horse farms and horse country, which we frequently get requests for, agricultural livestock farms. Rolling Hills, just the topography of Rolling Hills. We think of Somerset County, we think of the Rolling Hills. The suburban locations, the rustic environments. Every time I go to Somerville, I think this is really a cool town, and it's just, perfect for a motion picture, television show. So I know we're going to get more stuff over there, because the architecture there, the hotel, it's really quite interesting. You have a great county courthouse, which we would love to be able to have some filming in. It's beautiful on the outside, really cool on the inside, very historic. Duke Farms, which we've had many requests for over the years, and very unique. Vineyards, you have arboretums. We keep a list of locations that we're planning to send someone from our staff down to photograph. And I noticed high on the location list, it's going to probably happen in the next couple of months, the Sourlands Mountain Preserve we put on there, because it looks very interesting, and I think will be of great interest to production companies. Somerset County, the community college, the architecture there, we wanted some very ultra-modern, we had some ultra-modern productions that were looking for ultra-modern kind of architecture. And it was really interesting what you had there with the observatory and the whole thing, all very interesting and somewhat unique. I'd mention that, now I'm thinking about it, one of the first movies to actually, during the sound era, we're not talking about the silent era, to actually shoot in New Jersey was in the early 60s, The Miracle Worker, and they used the Gladstone train station where, with the movie with Patty Duke and Bancroft. So there is an abundance of things in Somerset County, and what we need to do is, how do you market it? We need to photograph them. We need to get them photographed, and then we have a Real Scout database, an online database that is on our website that filmmakers can access at any time, and that we also create unique location packages for production companies, because those photographs, that's the currency we use, aside from the currency of a tax credit, to attract motion picture and television productions, to show that we have what would be aesthetically right for a particular production. The TV series A League of Their Own, unfortunately, did not shoot here. You haven't even seen it yet. It's not on the air, but we did show the park in Bridgewater, the baseball stadium. There's many things. There's no question. And how to, the way we market is we get photos of these locations out to the industry. We do that by posting them to our website, and that everything we post to our website goes into an international database, photo database as well. So you're having filmmakers from all around the world looking at those locations. But there's a lot that's unique and a lot that filmmakers can take advantage of. And it's a good thing that you're relatively close to New York. So it makes it even easier for production companies to access those locations.
Well, I love to hear that, because we just launched a film commission in Somerset. So everything you're saying is music to my ears. Ben, what's your thoughts on this? Anything to toss into this conversation?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. I'll try to be quick. For me, and some other folks just mentioned these ideas, the starting point is really about what we call, in a very wonky way in my field, asset mapping, thinking about what you have in your area and what you can build on. And I saw the great suggestion of building something like the Gathering Place in Tulsa in the Chad. And if you all decide to do that, I would love to come visit, because that's an amazing place. I haven't actually been there, but I've seen lots of photos and know folks who are involved in designing it. But the reality is that was a $500 million park that took, I'm sure, a couple decades to design, plan, and actually build. Something that is potentially possible, but not something you can do overnight, and maybe not even in the careers of any of us on this call right now. So that was something that was done because of the unique characteristics that were present in Tulsa, a billionaire financier who funded the project, and creative talent in that area. So I really like to look at what is actually happening. And when I was in Baltimore working in Station North Arts District in the middle of the city, we did a number of asset mapping efforts, and found that Gaia, or Andrew Pisacani, a street artist who originally from New York, went to school in Baltimore, was living and working in the Arts District, and was voted by Juxtaposed magazine, Arts magazine, as the #1 muralist in the world for a couple of years in a row, and who's living in a building a couple of blocks away from my office. And we built a street art festival, an international street art festival, off of his connections and his talent, and used his connections to folks around the country and around the world to bring in artists to paint a project in the Station North Arts District in Baltimore. And immediately afterwards, I started getting calls and emails from folks around the country asking for help to do the exact same thing in their community. And I said, you could do this, but unless you have someone like an artist like Andrew or someone comparable, it really doesn't make sense to do it. You're going to be inventing this from scratch. You're going to have to find these connections on your own. It's going to be 10 times more difficult to do that. Who do you have in your community who has those kinds of connections? And maybe it's in performing arts, maybe it's in a different form of art besides street art. And one of my favorite examples of this, and I'll find the link and put it in the chat in a minute, is a project from LA where the county was working in an unincorporated area, Willowbrook, to basically do asset mapping and figure out how to invest a lot of dollars. And a great artist and designer, Rostin Wu, was involved and actually went around and went door to door to find the unique assets, which are actually the people in this community, and what their unique skill sets were, and what made this area stand out from other parts of Los Angeles, and just put together a really well-designed catalog of the guy who raised giant tortoises in his backyard, the person who never showed his work in LA, but showed his work around the country and created beautiful sculptures in his property, and all kinds of other examples like that. And maybe the final example I'll give, I've been working in Mariposa County, which is a rural county in the foothills of the Sierras. It's the county that, if you're coming from most of the populated parts of California, you pass through on your way to Yosemite. So a lot of people, millions of people every year, pass through this county on their way to one of the most popular national parks in the United States. And Despite that, this county is the poorest and least healthy in the state of California, and a lot of people maybe stop for gas, but don't do a whole lot more beyond that. And I wrote a creative placemaking master plan for them, which I saw a question there to mention which counties have done a great job with this. And that master plan was finished about 2 weeks ago, so I can't yet brag about the great implementation they've been able to do in just 2 weeks, but I'm sure I will in the near future. But the reality is that there are tons of things that are happening in this county that are unique and complementary to what happens in Yosemite. This county for a number of years was trying to basically compete with Yosemite, which is something that you just can't do. It'd be like, anyone near New York trying to directly compete with New York. It's, maybe something you might want to do, but at the end of the day, no one can actually do that. If you're near LA, you can't compete with LA. It's just the reality of how different places are unique. And instead, there's just so many rules. This is maybe unique to California, but so many rules in a national park, of course, things you can do, you can't do. You can't really perform outside very easily. You can't have large crowds. And so we encourage them to rely on all the things that people might want to do in the park they can't do in the park, have them do it in your county, just a 20-minute drive away. And there's a lot more I could say about that, but I'll pause there.
All right, thanks, Ben.
I know we're tight for time, but I really want to jump in and say just one last thing about Somerset County, and it's to claim it, right? Because a lot of time, and I say this as a person who moved to Princeton, New Jersey in 1998, but I'm really in West Windsor Township, right? And so I know there's sections of Somerset County that people don't realize that they're in Somerset County. So I think you might want to brand and claim your own, take it back from the various counties that people think they're in when they're really in Somerset County. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, because you're right. Montgomery is part of Somerset. We're not Mercer, and Franklin Township is part of Somerset. We are not New Brunswick or Middlesex, so I agree with you. Flipping over to our next and final official question for our panelists before we open it up to our audience here. New Jersey and Somerset County are not only rich in history, and we have a very diverse population representing many, many cultures. It's paramount to both engage and benefit all by innovating through this diversity. So the question is, do you have any ideas and examples of successful efforts in this diversity and inclusion sector? And I'm going to start that with Tanisha, because we kind of gave you a short amount of time on the last question.
Thank you. I believe in making sure that you include everybody in your community. And I guess I'll just give one example. When I was the executive director of the Arts Council of Princeton, one of the things that I noticed is that although our particular venue, and again, all of my stuff is very specific place-based, it's not countywide. When I noticed that although we were in primarily a community of color, that particular color was Latinx. There were immigrants from Central and South America in Princeton, that they weren't necessarily being included in the work that we were doing at the Arts Council of Princeton. And so we shifted to be more inclusive of the people. So I think just being cognizant of what you have in terms of your local, this is obviously if you're in a place that does not have a lot of diversity, I think it's a little shoehornish to try to now make it diversity, but you are in a place in Somerset County, you do have a lot of diversity, and making sure that you're getting all segments of the community. And I have sort of a framework, you sort of start with your mission, right? And then apply your values and then model humanity. And I think if you do that, you're going to capture all of the folks that you need. And again, at the Arts Council of Princeton, it wasn't just about diversity and inclusion from an ethnicity standpoint. It was also making sure that we were making, and I think we should all be thinking about this, making our work accessible for people who are differently abled, right? In terms of their, if they might have impairments in terms of hearing and sight. And that's something that I'm actually seeking to implement even at Symphony Hall, and going well beyond sort of the threshold of ADA requirements, and really thinking about how people engage in our programming. And one of the ways that this came to light is that this idea of reopening, many people who have sensitivities and things that make taking in live entertainment difficult for them said that they're going to be missing all of this online entertainment that they were able to take into. So I think thinking through some of these things that might have been temporary because we couldn't be in the physical venue. How can we actually keep that going so that people who, again, things I never thought about, might have sensitivities to fragrance, right? And so going in, I think it's a nice smelling, lavender smelling bathroom, but for some people that is something that is a real issue. And so I think making sure that all of the things that you're doing and actually having give people a seat at the table to be part of that. From an inclusion standpoint, again, I'm very clear that I've operated more than a half a century on this earth as a straight Black woman. It is very difficult for me to think anything else like a straight Black woman. So I need to bring other people in from a gender standpoint, from an ethnicity standpoint, although I will say, since I operate mostly in a predominantly non-Black community, I know how to navigate and think from that perspective. But I think it's important to bring in people that are not only different ethnicities, but also different abilities as you're doing your planning, so that you're making sure that you're being inclusive of your entire community.
Makes sense. And I agree with you entirely. The more people at the table contributing ideas, contributing their thoughts, makes a better product all the way around, no matter what you're focusing on. Ben, what's your thoughts on this? What experience have you had with incorporating diversity and inclusion in your programs?
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this topic as well. Where to start? I'll start with the last point Tanisha made, which is to recognize where I'm coming from, where any one of us are coming from. And regardless of where any one of us are coming from, we're coming from one place and have one perspective. So I appreciate, Tanisha, your perspective on that as well. I find that, unfortunately, one of the things the planning world and the arts world have in common in many cases, and I'm sure no one on this call is guilty of this, is that a lot of the goals and visions we set out are really about individually what we want to see in a place. So we want to see this Main Street look like the kind of place that I want to go to a restaurant, or we want this theater production to look like the kind of thing that I'm interested in. It's really hard to be empathetic with a group that is very distinctly different from us and think about what they might want to see or the aesthetics they're interested in. And there's definitely a certain amount of empathy that I think we can all individually build and put ourselves in others' shoes, but that only gets you so far. So it really is about building partnerships, to go back to one of the earlier questions and conversations we had, and inviting other people into those conversations. And for me, I'm going to try to answer this question, also answer some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat, which is about advice in West Baltimore, my hometown, and a few other things as well. Some of the work I did in Baltimore's first arts district in Station North, before the more recent Black Arts District was created just a couple of years ago, was exactly about this. It was about working with community leaders, organizers in Baltimore's Korean American community. Station North is both Baltimore's historically Koreatown, as well as Black leaders in the community. I'm, of course, not a member of either of those communities, but they're highly organized communities with performers and artists and designers and other cultural leaders that can tell you exactly what people are interested in seeing, what the aesthetics of architecture mean, how to see things through different eyes, and definitely relied on those perspectives to make decisions through my organization as well. I've also been working a lot to answer the question about some of the placemaking projects that have been successful that came in the chat earlier. In South Nashville, in Nolensville Pike. This is an area that hopefully no one from Nashville is listening. Could probably be described as pretty ugly. It's the suburban arterial road with lots of big setbacks, tons of asphalt and parking lots. It's where the Walmart for Nashville is located. But because of low rents and because of a lot of other complicated historical things, it is Nashville's international district. It's the largest Kurdish community outside of the Middle East, a large Somali community, really just kind of surprising, for me at least, coming from far away, for what you would expect to find in Nashville. It's one of the fastest growing immigrant communities in the entire United States now. And the efforts we put into this area and the plan we created was about building on what's actually working there, trying to look behind the Walmarts and see what's in the shopping centers nearby and what's actually working well, and not approach it from the perspective of this part of Nashville should look exactly like Broadway and other parts of downtown Nashville that attract all the tourists, but this could in fact be something distinct and unique and rather different, and relying on the folks who are there, who are making things work and economically creating a rather viable area, to rely on what's actually working for them and build on that success. And then very finally, I'll just mention two other projects that I think are definitely worth looking into on this topic. One is Destination Crenshaw in Los Angeles. This is LA's historically Black community that has had an investment of a new subway line that is running at grade, and the council member there has created, or is in the process of creating, what will be the largest collection of public art focused on the Black experience in the country. That'll be, I think it's under construction as of a couple of weeks ago. It'll be opening in the next couple of years. And it's really about bringing a uniquely Black perspective to visitors to LA. If you get off at LAX and you take the subways, this is where you first emerge from underground and can actually see what's going on in LA. And definitely encourage everyone to look into the process they put together to create that project. And then slightly closer to you all, the 11th Street Bridge project in DC is definitely worth looking into. And if we have time later, I can talk more about that.
Awesome, thanks. Kelly, I know you mentioned that Passaic County has an extremely diverse population. What's your thoughts on this?
So I guess it comes in many different sectors, and I'm going to start with like history just in general, right? Because that's our niche. You know, we have several sites that are from the 18th century. So it's the time of early settlement, and, you know, it's large tracts of land. So, you know, how are these, you know, places being maintained? So, you know, as we're doing our tours and our programming, we found that, you know, all of the history being told at these sites is, you know, it's the colonialist perspective, it's white history. It doesn't talk about women. It didn't talk about those enslaved. It didn't talk about the immigrants who came here. So we actually, in the county, from a history perspective and running our historic sites, which, right, we have to also, like, we want to tell an inclusive story. Like, this is the story. We're not, you know, taking parts of it to tell our story. So we started this Expanding the Narrative series, which focused on different points. And a lot of it we had to do research because we just didn't have it at our hands. So our first one was the lives of those enslaved and in servitude. So we had a county-wide like history made, and we did all of that research. So now that project is done. We're going to incorporate it into a formal exhibit at a few of our historic sites. And obviously now, anytime you're going to come to a tour, you know, that story is going to be told. Our next chapter is those on women from, you know, right, the county's founding till now. And obviously there's a lot of growth that has to happen with that program, but it's something that we're working towards to, you know, tell an inclusive history. The second is, you know, when we think of like, you know, arts and creative placemaking and projects, it's, and everyone has said this, and I guess to add, it's not just having, you know, different members of our community, it's like including all of our communities. And as a county, I'm sure you know, like, right, Passaic County has 16 municipalities. Now, if I selected 3 members of the community, right, not all 16 municipalities are, you know, represented. So it's also about having, you know, very clear representation from each of our municipalities so that they have a stake in what we're trying to accomplish. And then the other layer to that, right, it's the different organizations themselves. Like, you know, I have a good relationship with the Patterson Arts Reforming Communities, and now we're going to work on creating an African Heritage Center in Patterson. Does Clifton have, you know, either an arts, you know, group that we can connect with so that we're giving them the same resources and support that we're giving to like the Patterson organization? So it is also bringing all of the partners within our county to the table and making sure we have that, you know, line of communication. And it kind of goes back to the last question, which, you know, as we were talking more, you know, it's like the competition. Like, we don't want to create competition among, you know, the members of our community or the organizations in our communities or municipalities themselves. So having everybody, you know, at the table and a representative from all of that, I know that, right, those groups get bigger and bigger and bigger, but, you know, the information gets out. There's the opportunity to be a stakeholder on certain projects. We have the opportunity to have, you know, the different ideas, stuff that we might not think of, you know, stuff that we're like, no, this is great, right? So I just thinking having that open lines of communication, and I'll say, right, we're building that. It's not perfect, but we do have a tourism forum where we're trying to bring all of these different people together at least 4 or 5 times a year, just so that we could, right, make sure that all of our incentives are inclusive to storytelling, inclusive to how we're engaging with the arts and our public art projects, etc. So.
Awesome. Steve, we got 1 minute left on this topic before we get to the questions from our audience. Any final thoughts on this?
Say real quickly, we don't like the film industry and television industry, and our office follows, so we don't talk about this in the abstract any longer. We talk about it in the concrete. We don't talk about what we want to do. We talk about what we're actually doing. We've had a number of seminars that were co-hosted or really hosted by the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Hester Agadosi, who's the Chief Diversity Officer in the state. We've invited high-level executives from the industry to talk to the communities, the minority communities, and of course women as well, and talk about what they're doing to promote diversity within the production industry and how people can avail themselves of opportunities. We have a tax credit program and I credit the governor with this. He insisted that we have a 2% uplift for using diverse cast and crew, meaning women and minorities. And we've had, I won't list them now, but we've had a bunch of minority-driven productions with minority directors and minority casts. They're shooting right now, as a matter of fact. It's amazing the transformation that's taking place. We have two production assistant boot camps, which are designed to mainly to promote graduating students from college, to get them instructed a crash course in how to become a production assistant on a set, and so you can get into the industry. And that's your inroad for getting your foot in the door. And we have NBC Universal co-sponsors one, and now Sony Pictures is doing it. We are working with, as I mentioned to Tanisha before, working on training programs for students looking for apprenticeships in the trades as carpenters or electricians, getting them to think about working on film sets. Lastly, our production services directory is, you can recall information. It's a list of productions and services online, a list of production and services available in the state. You can get information by location, of course, and by subject matter, by name, but you can filter all your results by women, minority, or veteran-owned businesses. So if you're intent on doing it, which should be, you have that available to you. That's a brief summary of what some of the efforts we're making.
I love it. I love the passion and enthusiasm from all four of you. It is so incredible. And I love the way you all threaded together economic development, job growth, culture and the arts, how this is all fostering this, the sense of community, the sense of beauty for all five of our senses. So awesome. Kudos to you all. And now I know I've been lucky because I could just jump in and ask questions whenever I want. So I'm going to ask Courtney what questions we've got from the audience, because I'm sure they're eager to ask the same questions. Courtney, what do we have?
Yes, so we've got a lot of great questions. A few of them I think you actually managed to answer while you were going, which is great. And sorry to everybody, I don't think we're going to get to all of them. But there was a question early on about, I'm going to paraphrase, but it really seems to be barriers to arts, culture, and history. And the example given was a local ordinance at a town here in Somerset County that basically says if you are going to do any display of arts, performance, etc., for financial gain, you have to get a license. Now, whether that ordinance is actually enforced in that town is a whole nother thing, but kind of a discussion around and thoughts on, trying to eliminate those type of barriers.
I mean, if that ordinance exists, that means just going to a council member and asking them to strike it or to amend it, or, because especially since, again, being a former municipal official, to actually enforce that probably requires bodies, right? And is there somebody that's actually assigned to that? And is that really a way that they want to spend the town resources? I don't know. But again, I'm a big fan of contacting your elected officials. That's the reason why we elected them, Commissioner. And so
we listen.
And they do. And you have one right here that you can approach about something like that. But if you've identified barriers, I definitely would recommend that you go to appointed and elected officials to talk about mitigating and eliminating anything that you perceive as a barrier.
Are there any barriers that you all have come upon that the county or other towns should be aware of that are kind of common ones that have inhibited arts, culture, heritage, tourism?
Money, that's the big one. I remember when I launched Destination Trenton, and again, Steve was a great help at that time. Now, this was about 2007, I want to say. And frankly, everybody thought I was crazy to create a tourism initiative in a place like Trenton, New Jersey. And I went out and I campaigned, and ultimately, I think I raised about $500,000 for the implementation of that. Steve Shaker, he knows when I'm determined. But it took really great partnerships of with the elected officials, if I recall correctly, county commission at the time are freeholders. So that took a real partnership, but usually it's money. It's money so that you can engage professionals like yourself, Courtney, and others who can come in and put together the infrastructure that's needed to really roll out a program that's impactful. Because you don't just do this because you wake up one day and decide that you want to you want to do an initiative. You actually have to plan and execute, right? So, you know, Ben might have some insight on this as well.
Yeah, money. Definitely number one. Number two for me is often, this is a lot of what we wrote about in the Mariposa County plan I talked about a minute ago, is permitting. And this is related, I think, to the question that was put in the chat, which is, excuse me, just how you actually go about getting permission to do the things you want to do. And often, of course, it takes money and connections, but there are often rules on the books, and sometimes they aren't actually enforced. That one sounds like one that's perhaps not enforced, but often permits for events and things that actually block streets and take over public right-of-ways are enforced. And I find, for me, that we changed a lot of the rules in Baltimore City and even some in the state of Maryland, that just complaining about how much of a pain it is not always the most effective way to do it. But we found pretty easily that they were not enforced in an equitable fashion. And it really meant that, frankly, in Baltimore, white-run events were more likely to actually make it through the hoops than black-run events. And being able to prove that rules like that are having a discriminatory impact is often really helpful in getting everyone on board to try to overturn them or change them in whatever way you need to change them.
Yeah, can I just add, the biggest obstruction that we encounter is when when a town will create an ordinance that's so restricted that we couldn't possibly do filmmaking in that town. If you're saying to a filmmaker, I'm just talking from the filmmaking perspective, that we'll consider your permit, we'll get back to you in 30 days. Well, thank you, but in 30 days that show may be on the air already. I mean, we have especially television shows, they're working 2 weeks in advance tops. Some commercials are working half a week to a week in advance sometimes. So it's restrictive permits that are unreasonable, have unreasonable requirements that prevent us from bringing production companies to certain towns. That's the biggest barrier for us, and that needs to be overcome. But we know it won't happen in Somerset County because you got a commission there, and we're going to be working closely with you. So we're happy to do that.
Kelly, did you want to add anything on this one, or are you good?
I have to, my government hat, right? Because I also was in enforcement. So I was in the Patterson Preservation Office prior to coming to the county. So everything's about permits. I mean, the first, for us, and just I think in general, work with your towns. I'm sure towns would love to have art exhibits, musical performance, and they'll work with you on your permitting process or whatever that may be. They could even waive fees, right? It just takes a resolution to waive those fees. For us, we ourselves have permitting process within the county. I think we're a little fortunate that a lot of the events or any things that we need to do, we're using our own property, and that might be something that Somerset could consider as they're moving forward. Or, right, we have state partners, we have the national park. So there's a lot of definitely different jurisdictions. And, we comply, we're filling out permits to use, land. And, a lot of it's coordination, it's public safety. You're going to have a concert in the park, you're going to have Shakespeare in the park, whatever it may be. You need people to be safe. So it's police, it's coordinating, maybe volunteers who are going to help at the event. So I know that it's just another layer, but, right, going back to planning is important before executing. So just, keeping that in mind as we move forward with those types of events and functions.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I do think, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions, but there was just one quick question about a quality of life tax. And I did want to say and kind of pitch that in 2019, the state legislature did pass the arts, the ability for counties and municipalities to pass an art tax. I believe Jersey City might be the only one that's done it thus far because it was passed in 2019, which means everybody would be doing the tax in 2020, and that wasn't necessarily the apt time. But that might be something moving forward that, you know, locals consider to help support the arts and culture. But with that, I will pass it back to Commissioner Morano to wrap up.
Well, thank you, Courtney, and thank you to everybody that participated on this event today. We at Somerset really, truly appreciate our panelists and all of those who attended. I hope those who attended got as much out of it as I did, because I really enjoyed hearing all of your thoughts. And I am super excited, super enthusiastic to launch our long-term plans for culture and arts, and of course our film commission that has just been launched. So with that note, I thank Caitlin from our cultural and heritage group too. She does an extraordinary amount of work for us, and I do appreciate all she's doing. So thank you so much for joining, and please have a great week.